Hey guys, it's Sarah and I am here to talk about everything I read in July. And this is definitely the best reading month I've had this year. I read 15 books and quite a few of them are on my favorites of the year so far. So it was definitely a win. Starting off the month of July, I picked up a book by Christopher Moore, and Christopher Moore is an author that I have loved in the past. I just haven't read one of his books in a very long time, so I was able to pick one up again this month. And this is A Dirty Job, and it was actually on my birthday reading project as well, and this was sent to me by one of my subscribers, the one who actually suggested this book to me, so she sent me a copy and I really enjoyed this book. It was really funny. Christopher Moore definitely writes satire, and this one follows a man who is dealing with the death of his wife, and he understands that she's dead when he sees somebody standing over her hospital bed, but nobody else can see this person, it's just him. And he comes to realize, or to find out, that he is actually becoming death. So he is starting to become the Grim Reaper, basically, and he's kind of a part of that whole process now. So definitely fantastical type of things happening, and it was funny. It made me laugh out loud quite a bit. The way that he writes is just, you know, it's kind of serious and kind of fast-paced, and then it's just like really funny for a while. And I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I picked up is Bring Me Back by B.A. Paris, and this was sent to me from the publishers in exchange for a review, which I do have a separate review video for this one, so I will have it linked down below if you guys want to see more of my thoughts. But B.A. Paris is a thriller author, and she has been writing, this is her 3rd book, I believe, and I've read all of them, and this one I enjoyed. It wasn't my favorite of her 3. I enjoyed the other 2 a little bit better, but I still really did enjoy this one. And it became, I was able to kind of predict the ending as it was starting to kind of unfold. Like, one of my predictions was coming true, and the way that it was kind of revealed I didn't enjoy quite as much, but I still really enjoyed the story overall, and I think her writing's fantastic, and she kept me guessing most of the time, which is what you want in a thriller, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I picked up was also on my birthday reading project, and that is The Paris Wife by Paula McLean. And this is a historical fiction following Ernest Hemingway's first wife. And this one was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be, so it was just kind of more information-y than storyline for me personally. But it is their love story and how they met and fell in love, and kind of seeing how their marriage happened and what happened to break it up, and a little bit afterwards as well. So it was interesting. Since it was a historical fiction, I don't know how much of it was completely accurate and how much liberty the author had to take as far as the storyline goes. But it did give me a little bit of a glimpse into how Ernest Hemingway was possibly his, you know, just the way he was with people and his life and everything, which I think is a little bit more documented than his wife personally. But he was kind of a jerk. I'm just gonna say that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him now. I mean, I never really had any feelings about him to begin with. I haven't read anything by him yet, but it was very interesting. Very, very interesting. I found myself frustrated with him quite a bit just because of the way he was treating people and all that. But I don't know. Overall, I enjoyed it. It wasn't, you know, fantastic or life-changing in any means, so I gave it a 3 stars. And then I picked up Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. This one blew my mind. I actually started reading this right before we moved. I had downloaded a copy onto my Kindle because we were moving and I didn't want to take a whole bunch of physical books with me, you know, in the car. I just wanted to kind of keep my Kindle handy and read on that. So I put this on my Kindle so I could read on my Kindle. And it took me a few weeks, literally, to kind of get into this. And a lot of it is because we were moving and we were going through a lot of stuff. But it took me probably 30% through the book to really get a feel for the writing, to get a feel for what was happening, and for some of the action to really pick up. There were a couple of action scenes, you know, towards the beginning and all that, but it was like, you know, I don't know, it wasn't like capturing me completely yet. But for some reason, once it hit 30%, I was just in it to win it. And I could not put it down after that. I read it really quickly after that. It just did take me some time. And I think part of that, again, was we were moving and going through a lot of stuff, and I didn't have quite as much time to read as I would have liked. So I did start this in June, finished it in July, but I could not put it down after like that first 30%. And one thing I had to get used to was that this book has a lot of footnotes in it, and at first I wasn't sure how I felt about them. But the more I read them, the more I was realizing it was giving you really good information and backstory into this world, because this is the first book in a series. And it was giving you that information in the footnotes instead of having to read an entire chapter about what the history of this one thing is or the history of this ceremony is. So I ended up really appreciating it. And then there were a couple of footnotes that were just one sentence, and they were just there to make you laugh, and they definitely made me laugh. I really enjoyed J. Kristoff's humor in here. I really enjoyed the characters and their banter together. And I have a new fictional crush. I loved Trick in this book so much. He was one of my favorite things about this book in general. But this book is an epic fantasy, and it follows a girl named Nia who is orphaned, and she ends up being trained by somebody to go to an assassin's school. The reason she wants to go to this school is she wants to learn these skills so that she can in turn use them against some of the people who had her father killed. So she's definitely on a revenge. It's, you know, a revenge story. She wants to get revenge on these people who killed her father. And she's going to this assassin school to learn these skills and to learn the tricks and to kind of get behind the scenes type stuff so she can use those to get her revenge. She is making friends. She is learning all these different things. I really, really enjoyed the training aspect in here. The way that they are trained is very unique and very hard. And it kind of gave me a little bit of anxiety. I was like, I don't think I would not survive this. I would not survive this training that they're going through. So it was very interesting. I really liked the way that they did it. And I just absolutely loved this book, and I'm so happy. This book made me want to read all the fantasy. I am in a super fantasy mood right now, and I'm just gonna ride that while I can. Super excited, can't wait to get my hands on book 2. 5 stars. The next book that I read was for my birthday reading project again, and that is The Given Day by Dennis Lehane. And this one I listened to on audiobook, and I'm gonna be honest, it wasn't my favorite. I gave this like 2.5, 3 stars, more like a 2.5. And the reason for that is I found myself very confused a lot of the time through this book. It follows 2 different families during a time when there is a lot of political turmoil, and you kind of see both of their families going through and what they're going through. Babe Ruth is also in it, which was very random for me, and I didn't understand why he was there. But the reason I had a hard time with this is because I found myself lost a lot of the times. It jumped back and forth, but at least in the audiobook, I don't know if the physical book was different, but in the audiobook, it didn't give you any indication at the beginning of the chapters of which family we're following now. And a few times I found myself in the middle of a chapter before I realized who we were following. So I felt like there wasn't enough differentiating between the families early enough in the chapter for me to realize who we're following. I'd have to wait for a name or for something referencing something that's already happened in order for me to figure out who we were following. So that really threw it off for me, and I had a hard time following it. So because of that, it was only like a 2.5 for me. And I also felt it was very long, and it could have been condensed a lot more as well. But yeah, so not quite my favorite, but I read it. And the next book I read is also on my birthday reading project, and that is Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. This one took me months and months and months to read, but I finally finished it up. I've just been slowly reading it because it was an extremely, extremely long book, one of the longest books on my reading project, but I've just been slowly making my way through it. The reason I've been slowly making my way through it is because it's not like a super fast-paced book. It is a historical fiction, and it follows a young girl who is living in England and kind of just some things that she's going through with her family situation. And Overall, I enjoyed it. It was a good story. I really did feel like it was too long, and I got a little bit lost in some of the detail at times. I didn't feel like it needed to be quite as detailed as it was, but overall, you know, it was a good story. It was enjoyable. I just really felt like it was too long, and I probably would have enjoyed it more if it were shorter and kind of got to the point a little bit faster. But yeah, I was a little bit conflicted because the writing was good. Like, I enjoyed the writing of it, but it was just too long. I really felt like it could have been a lot shorter and still gotten the point across in a quicker way. So I gave it 3 stars. And then I picked up this one, Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. And I wanted to pick this up now because this was the Tonight Show's summer read book. And it's the first time they've done it, I think, and Jimmy Fallon put a poll up on 5 different books that he highlighted. This was one of them, and he had his audience pick a book, and that was going to be the summer read, and he was going to read it along with everybody. And when I saw that, I thought it was really cool, and I voted for this one. And as soon as it won, I was like, I'm going to read this. I'm going to pick it up off my shelf right now. I had no plans to read it this summer. I just wanted to read it eventually. But as soon as he picked it, I thought, perfect time to do this. I can read it along with everybody else. And I ended up buddy reading it with Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library. Okay. This book was amazing. It was amazing. This is a young adult fantasy book, and it follows a girl named Zaylee, and she lives in a world where their tribe of people are called Magi's, and they used to be able to hold magical powers. Now, the government, or the royalty of the king of this land, has completely banned magic and has made it so that magic can no longer physically be done. And he keeps her people in kind of I don't want to say captivity, but they're very limited in what they can do. They don't have a lot of freedom. They have certain tasks that they're allowed to do. They are not allowed to practice magic. They don't have a whole lot of freedom, basically. So you're following Zaylee, who has come to a point where it is being recognized that magic has the opportunity to come back in a certain way. And she comes upon this realization by meeting somebody from the royal family, and they discover this together, and it just changes everything. So now they are on this quest to try to bring magic back to her people. And oh my gosh, okay. The characters in here were fantastic. I found myself very conflicted on a lot of them. I found myself just not knowing where things were gonna go. She really surprised me in a lot of the details that happened in here. It seemed like every single chapter in here was very important and very relevant to the story. I didn't feel like there was any wasted chapters or any, you know, just kind of filler things that are just kind of thrown in there. Everything was very important and meaningful to the story, which I felt was fantastic. I did not want to put this book down. It was definitely fast-paced, and just some of these characters were so great. And then my heart was breaking in a lot of points too. There was some brutality going on. There's a couple of different battle scenes in here that were just heartbreaking, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I understand the hype around this book, and it is definitely warranted. I've already pre-ordered the second book. I can't wait to read the sequel and find out what's going to happen. There's a lot of unanswered questions right now about what's going to happen here and where some of these characters are going to go, because you don't know where they are going to end up being at the end. You have no idea what's going to be happening. So I loved it. I loved it. I highly recommend it. And even if you're new to fantasy, I think this would be a good one, because it's a young adult, so it's not super complicated. You can definitely follow it and understand it. And it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It keeps you interested the entire time. And the characters, again, are just so fantastic. So definite 5 stars. The next one that I read is another one that is for my birthday reading project, and that's The Zookeepers Wife by Diane Ackerman, I believe. I didn't enjoy this book, you guys. And I was really disappointed because I really thought I would like this book. It is a World War II historical fiction, which is something that I'm definitely getting much more into, and I've really enjoyed most of what I read in that genre. But this one did not do it for me. And the reason behind that is because I really love the premise of this book. This book is being kind of marketed as, you know, there is a woman and her husband, and they are in Germany, I believe, in World War II, and they end up, like, they're zookeepers. Like, they own a zoo that, you know, it's their own private enterprise, they own it. And they end up taking in Jewish hostages, or not hostages, but refugees from the war, and kind of housing them in the zoo. That sounds amazing. But I didn't really get that. I did not get much of that at all. And I found myself just being like, where's the story here? There was a lot of factual things about World War II happening. There were a lot of chapters that kind of went off in different directions and got away from the story. There were at least 2 chapters that had to deal with bugs. And like, that doesn't have anything to do with the story. So I found myself getting a little bit lost. When it came back to the story, I was still in it, but it just went off way too much, and I felt like I didn't really get the story that I was being told I was going to get. And I was disappointed in that. And I ended up not really caring about what was happening because of that. So everything that was happening, I didn't care about because it wasn't what I was hoping it was going to be. And the part that was what I was hoping it was going to be wasn't as strong because of that. So yeah, I only gave it 2 stars. So I didn't enjoy it. I found myself bored a lot, and yeah, I have heard the movie is what I want, so maybe I would be interested in seeing the movie at some point. But yeah, the book was not for me. The next book that I read is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, and I enjoyed this book actually. This is a post-apocalyptic book that follows a theater troupe that kind of travels around and entertains people in different cities and points, and kind of self-made reservations, if you will, because it is post-apocalyptic, so people are having to kind of create their own communities basically. And this theater troupe travels around and they entertain people and put on shows, and they're called the Symphony. So it was really good. I enjoyed it. I really liked as they were going through the apocalypse and kind of what was happening and how that kind of happened. That was really interesting to me. And then I enjoyed some parts where it was skipping around a little bit. Now, normally that bothers me if it doesn't kind of make sense early on why it's happening. And at first it didn't. So I was a little bit put off at first. I was like, wait a second, what's going on? Why is it skipping around so much? Eventually it made sense because characters started tying things together and characters became kind of connected, so it kind of showed you how that happened. So I did end up appreciating it. I just wish it would have happened a little bit earlier. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and the writing was great. I thought the writing was really beautiful, and I enjoyed the characters. And some hard things happened in here, you know, post-apocalyptic, so some difficult things were happening, but it was good, and I gave it 4 stars. And then I participated in the Book Buddy-a-thon for the month of July, so I will leave my vlog linked down below as well, where I will go into much more detail about how I feel about these next books. But I did end up reading 6 books during that readathon, which was insane, and so that's going to be the rest of this wrap up here. But the first one I read was Sal, and this is by Mick Kitson. And I buddy read this with my buddy for the readathon, which was Lynn, and I really enjoyed this book. This was a nice surprise. I went into this not knowing anything at all. I had no idea what this book was about. This book is about a set of sisters who end up escaping an abusive household, and they go and live out in the woods just to get away from everybody and everything. There's reasons they're out there instead of trying to find a home or, you know, trying to find refuge somewhere else. There's a reason they're in the woods. They kind of need to be away from everybody else. So you see them, you know, in survival mode in the woods. And they end up meeting a few different people who are also out in the woods for whatever reason. So you see their connection with them, and you also see what's happening back at their home that, you know, that they escaped from. So very, very interesting. I really liked it a lot. The characters were fantastic, and the bravery of these girls was incredible. And just, you know, seeing them survive, and these are young girls, they're 13 and 10. So they are young kids who are doing this. So yeah, it was really good. I had to get used to the writing style because this is a book set in Scotland and it's by a Scottish author. So that's not quite something I'm used to. But once I got used to it, I was good. So I enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars. The next one I picked up is The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. And this was the longest book on my TBR for the readathon. It's at over 500 pages, but I read it in 2 days and it was fantastic. So this one follows a set of sisters who go through something really, really traumatic in their childhood, and it involves their mother. Now, as they're adults, you see how different they become. You see them kind of grow apart and you start unraveling why they're growing apart. One of them still has a relationship with their father, the other one doesn't really, and you kind of see why all this stuff is happening. And the sister who is still living in their hometown, still with their father, you know, all that stuff, she is going through a lot of different things as well. She has kind of a harder life and is not the best at making decisions. And you see her get involved in a school shooting. So she's kind of a witness to a school shooting. She's there when it happens. And you kind of see how that happens. She becomes part of the trial and you're going through all that kind of stuff. And then you're also seeing the older sister who has moved away, you know, for certain reasons, and kind of see what she has been going through. All of this is stemming from something very, very traumatic that happened in their childhood together. And oh man, it was so good. It was really good. The characters are fantastic. It kept me guessing. I didn't know what happened in their childhood. There was kind of little hints here and there, but nothing, you know, to really go on. And then you see what happened and oh my gosh, it was awful and brutal, and a couple of scenes were pretty graphic, but nothing like Pretty Girls. If you've read Pretty Girls, that was more brutal than this one for sure. It was a lot darker, a lot more brutal. This one is still hard hitting, but not quite as bad. So if you're nervous about Karen Slaughter and the brutality, I think you would still probably like this one. There's a little bit in there, but not as bad. And yeah, I ended up really, really loving this, and I gave it 5 stars, and I'm really happy I did, because Karen is becoming an author I just really, really want to get into. And now that I've read 2 of her books and I've given them both 5 stars, I have high hopes for more of her work as well. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. The next book that I read is The Hearts We Sold by Emily Lloyd Jones, and this one was a huge surprise. I went into this thinking I would be fine with it and maybe give it a 3 stars and be good to get rid of it afterwards, but I ended up really loving this book. It was such a surprise for me. This follows a young girl, and it is an urban fantasy, so it's set in today's world, but there are demons that are prevalent and present and part of society, and people have the opportunity to go to these demons and they can trade their body parts for a wish. So anything that they want or anything that they need, the demons will make a deal and make that come true as long as they give them one of their body parts, whichever one they need or ask for. Very interesting premise. Our main character here ends up trading her heart, and it was a very interesting concept, and it was a very interesting reason that this demon wanted hearts instead of limbs. Usually it was like limbs or arms or fingers or something that people would trade for, and so that's what she was expecting, but he asked for her heart. And it was very, very interesting. I again have another crush in this one. I absolutely love James, love him. And you see her kind of become part of this group of people who gave their hearts to this demon, and they are in turn kind of tasked for missions that they need to do for him. So it's a whole thing. And yeah, it was just really, really good. I really like the relationship between all of these people, and they're all so very different. It was pretty heartbreaking in a few parts as well, and I love the way that it ended. The ending was fantastic. So definitely a huge surprise. Wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. I gave it 4 stars, and I definitely want to read more from this author now. The next book that I picked up was another book from my birthday reading project, and that's A Mother's Confession by Kelly Rimmer, and I read this on my Kindle. This one was another huge surprise. And I didn't know what this book was about at all, but I know it's been suggested to me. And this follows a woman whose husband has committed suicide, and that's kind of how the book opens. Her husband commits suicide, and you see her dealing with that grief. You see her caring for their daughter. You see her dealing with his parents and with her parents, who she was estranged from for a while, but they had recently come back together. It really deals with grief. Like, this is a big book about grief and kind of overcoming that and coming to terms with things that have traumatically happened and the way it mentally has affected our main character. All right, so you follow her. You also follow her mother-in-law, so the mother of her husband who has killed himself. You follow her storyline as well, and you see how he was growing up with her as a mother and her interacting with him, and then reacting to how he's growing up and who he's hanging out with and all this stuff. So you go back and forth between these two women. His mother infuriated me to a point where I was almost screaming at my book. I was like, you are raising a psychopath. He is becoming who he became to be because of the lessons you're teaching him. And, you know, not all of it is the parents' fault. I don't believe that. But some of it can be. Some of it can be. You know, it depends on how you raise your children and how you deal with the things that they do and consequences you give them. And in her mind, he was the perfect angel. He was an only child. He could do no wrong. If anyone ever said he did anything wrong, they were wrong, and she would fight tooth and nail about it. She wouldn't even listen to anybody who criticized her son at all, ever. No girl that he dated was good enough for him, and she made sure he knew that. And I wanted to throttle this woman. Gave me lots of feelings, a whole lot of feelings. And you know, then you go to his wife and their relationship together and how his upbringing has affected that as well, and how it's still affecting it because they live down the street from his parents. So she's still a daily factor in their lives, and you see how she reacts to their relationship and what has been happening between them, and you see her justify everything, and it is unreal. Unreal. I loved it. Obviously, I can't stop talking about it right now. I'm trying not to give too much away because there are some things in here that are not obvious in the beginning until the story kind of starts unfolding. So yeah, but amazing. I loved it. I can't wait to read more from Kelly Rimmer now, and it was a 5-star read. After that, I picked up A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas, and this is a novella from the Court of Thorns and Roses series. There was an original trilogy, and I read all 3 of those. This is kind of a bridge novella that is supposed to fill in the gaps between the last book and then the next story arc that's coming up in this series. I was disappointed in this one. And the reason I was disappointed is because I was expecting this to have some sort of plot line that was going to give us hints of what's going to happen next, but it didn't. This really was a nice novella, and we're back with all the characters that I love, and they're celebrating a holiday, and that was kind of it. There really was no plot in here, and I felt like it wasn't necessary. It didn't add anything to the story overall. It didn't give us any hints about what's going to be coming up. It didn't give us any hints about who the characters are going to be that we're following in the next story arc. And that's what I wanted. And that just didn't happen. So I was definitely let down by this one. It was still fine. I'm still glad I read it. And I love these characters so much. I love the sense of family that they have. They are really the epitome of like a self-made family. And you see how much they care about each other and how much they take care of each other, and that was definitely prevalent in here big time. So that I loved. I love the banter between them. I love just their relationships. So that was in here. There was also a pretty steamy sex scene. I wish there was a little bit more. That probably would have kept me a little bit more interested. It just wasn't what I was really craving from it, so I gave it a 3 stars. Still good. The writing is still great. Just not really what I wanted from it. And last, but definitely not least, is All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. Okay. I did not know what this was about going into it at all. I had not heard any feedback, I was purposely staying away from it because I expected to love it because I love Colleen. And boy, did I love this book. This book deals with infertility. It follows a couple who meet, and you see them meeting, and then you also follow them a few years into the future, and they're married and they're trying to have a baby, and they've been trying for 7 years and it hasn't been happening. And so you're going back and forth between when they meet and kind of how their relationship started, and then, you know, after they're married and they're going through all this really hard stuff and their marriage is kind of crumbling around them. Oh my gosh, this book. Every heartstring I had was just being tugged in every different direction all at the same time. I had so much sympathy for these characters, for both of them, both, you know, the husband and the wife. I love the way that they met. I thought that was fantastic and it was so great. I love the way that they connected. I loved the very beginnings of their relationship. So you're getting her perspective from, you know, how she's dealing with this. You also see how he's dealing with it, and there's just, you know, you feel for both of them. And you see them trying to come together, but it's really hard. That's a really hard thing to put on a couple. And so I was kind of like, oh, they're meeting and they're in love, and oh, yay. And then we're like, oh no, things are crumbling. Oh no, okay, we're still in love again. You know, it's just very back and forth. And I could not put it down. And I read through it so quickly. I read this in 2 sittings. I could have easily read it in 1 if I had had more time during the day. But just, oh, it was so fantastic. And at one point, it hit a point where I was reading it and I went, oh no, and I had to put it down for a second. And I said, are they gonna survive? I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna survive or not. And there was a great aspect in here as well, something that kind of saves their marriage, and I loved that too. I won't give anything away, but oh my gosh, I love it, love it, love it. Another 5-star read for Colleen Hoover for me. She has not let me down yet. I love Colleen Hoover so much. I love this. I would give it 50 million stars if I could. I absolutely loved it. All right guys, that's it for me. So definitely my most successful reading month of the year so far. I was just in it to win it, and I loved so much of what I read. Had a few misses as well, to be expected, but yeah, fantastic reading month. I loved it. So leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you read any of these books and what your thoughts were. Let me know what your favorite book was in the month of July and how your reading went. I would love to know. And I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great day. Bye.